Hey, Carella here with Evidence, and today I want to share with you a few tips and tricks on layering. Now, I'm sure most of you are familiar with layering as it works really well with orchestration, with production, works well with drawing. It's a pretty universal concept. Though when it comes to trailer sound design in particular, there's a lot of unique ways to approach layering. There's a few techniques or different mindsets that you can use to arrange layers together. So in this little video, I decided to share with you a few examples of creative ways of layering. Let's check it out. So the first technique is probably the easiest and the most logical thing to do. Linear layering. So how this works is basically starting with the low end of the spectrum, sub-hit, putting a layer above this, so the low hit, so this really allows you to create a full sound. If you take away the layers in the middle, it does not work. Every layer really contributes something to fill up the sound. Now, the next technique I want to talk about is what I call the scoop, or the spoon, or the pocket, or the smiley face. What it really involves is some advanced EQing, or at least some subtractive EQing to force layers to work with each other. So in this scenario, I had two sounds that I really liked, a snare roll and a tom roll. They both have really interesting textures, but they're kind of fighting for the same space. So what I'll do here is, in a very metal fashion, scoop the mids out of the snares. You get this very flamey kind of Skyrim sound, and this allows you to actually put the toms in that mid-range space. So altogether, works perfectly. Of course, I added a bit of low end just to add some weight, and we get this. It's also nice to take away the mids with trailer sound design because it has to work with dialogue, and dialogue usually sits in the low mids mid-range. Okay, so before we go into the next section, I think it's important to understand the notion of food groups. So food groups refers to not food, but the actual way of classifying sounds. So for example, you have metals, skins, woods, animals. All these are classified in what we call food groups. Now, I think the term is really wrong, so I renamed it into Pokemon type. I think it makes way more sense. So you have metal Pokemon, skin Pokemon, rock Pokemon, all that stuff, water, electricity. These are what I call my Pokemon types. So over here, you can see with the colors, I have this blue and warm tones here. So blue corresponds to metal. And these warm colors, like before, corresponds to skins. So in this scenario, it would be toms. And the black one is the abyss. It's the super lows. So why should you use different food groups or Pokemon types? Well, the idea is that just like orchestration, you want to mix brass with strings, with woodwinds. It creates kind of a richer sound. It's more produced. It sounds more expensive, if I may say. So in a nutshell, what I did here is that I mixed the skins with the metals. Skins, all right, adding metals. Pretty fat sound. It's almost as if skin plus metal creates a new Pokemon type like dragon. The next technique I want to talk about involves stage positioning. Now, most people think it involves reverbs, and that is true, but there's actually much more than that. In order to position objects into a space, you have to take into consideration volume, EQ, and stereo width. For example, if you have something with a lot of reverb, it will be very distant, but if the imaging is too wide, it will actually get closer. Something distant is also a bit more narrow. So, for instance, let's take a look at this example here. This is the Bram Evil God from Instinct. Now what happens here is that it only sounds like one sound, but there's actually a few things going on. First of all, we have our sub that is centered. Very clean. Then we have our reverb layer, which has less high end to give an illusion of distance. It is also wide, but not too wide. What I used as a wide element is actually the close and distorted layer over here. So altogether, to to me, positioning is really the key technique to sound cinematic. I think Hans Zimmer and Junkie XL do it really well, especially on drums. You can really fill a mix with very little if you know how to position your instruments correctly. Alright, so hopefully you learned a few things in this video about layering. It's a really fun process. Of course, this is only scratching the surface. If you want to learn more about trailer sound design, I would encourage you to check out my class on Evident entitled Trailer Sound Design from Source to Cinema. Now, this is a class where we record everything from scratch. We synthesize our hits, our drums, we create our risers, our brams, our whoosh hits, everything from scratch. We do not use any third-party library. So it's a really fun and experimental process, and I'll also teach you a few mixing tricks on how to get loudness, punch, clarity, using reverb and contrasting spaces. Also, feel free to check this other video where I explain how to create a white noise whoosh hit out of a cardboard box, which is a bit unusual, but it goes to show you how much you can do with so little. So all that said, feel free to check out my class on Evidence, and happy sound design. Thank you.